We begin to see sectors of the economy expand that wouldn't have expanded otherwise. That the economy would be saying normally, no, don't expand that, expand here. And as time goes on, it requires more and more money being printed to sustain these artificial firms and artificial lines of production. But they can't keep printing money and creating money over and over because ultimately they'll destroy the currency. So eventually they have to stop the inflation. And then all this production that's been propped up that can't survive without these artificial infusions of money, they fail. And then you get this depression. And then we're told we caused that. The government had nothing to do with that. That's because of us. And if only they had been able to crack some more skulls, they could have prevented this depression. Everything is always our fault. The financial crisis was our fault. Inflation is our fault. That's greedy businessmen. That's labor unions. It's never the government's fault. They're always innocent bystanders. Now, if you're 7 years old, you might be satisfied with explanations like those, but after a while, you have to say, maybe the government has an interest in making us think that all good things are caused by it, and all the bad things are caused because we don't have enough of them. The fact is, in this most recent financial crisis, you know how many agencies, state and federal, we have in this country whose job it is to regulate financial markets? 115. So you mean to tell me that if we had just had 116, then we wouldn't have had this crisis? These regulators, we had plenty of them. None of them saw the crisis coming, almost none of them. And most of these people, let's face it, are not the brightest bulbs in their class. If you go to business school, you do not say to yourself, I can't wait to get out so I can work for the SEC. No, does not happen. Doesn't happen. That's the kids who are in the bottom of the class and they say, I guess I got to go work for the SEC. And they wind up being time-serving drones. And the kids who graduate at the top of their class run rings around. It is not for lack of regulators that we had this problem. Who's the chief regulator of the banking system? The Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve Chairman. Did they perceive that there were problems coming down the line? Greenspan told everybody you should take out adjustable rate mortgages and that the fundamentals are sound. Bernanke said there's no housing bubble. Appraisement practices are sound. Lending practices are great. Everybody should get in with both hands. That's what these people said. Greenspan, this guy's supposed to be like in charge of everything. We're supposed to just bow down in front of this guy. He's the wise planner, the former saxophone player turned Federal Reserve Chairman. We're supposed to say, oh my gosh, Alan, you know what interest rates should be. We're too stupid to decide them on our own. You better tell us what it is. And the thing is, he would say things like, I'm not kidding, he would say things like, I had this feeling in my gut, and so I decided to lower interest rates by 25 basis points. A feeling in his gut? And meanwhile, you've got people who practically worship this guy. You remember the story of Stephen Glass? He was a reporter for the New Republic magazine, and they made this wonderful movie about him, Shattered Glass, because he used to just make up his stories. He invented the stories. People would say, gosh, how does he break all these fascinating stories? Because he invented them. He just made them up. They didn't actually occur. So one of the stories that he invented was that some Wall Street investors had built a shrine to Greenspan with flowers and candles and an image of Greenspan, and they would gather together and meditate there. Now that was a made-up story, but the point is nobody noticed that was a made-up story. People thought, yeah, that seems plausible. That is creepy. I mean, this is what we are taught, the type of disgusting, superstitious reverence we are taught to have for these people. And then it turns out they're dead wrong. Greenspan even was interviewed, it was Diane Sawyer, I can't remember. He was interviewed not long ago, and she played a portion of his congressional testimony. Total gibberish that makes no sense whatsoever. And she asked him to explain what this meant. And he admitted that he was just making stuff up. He was trying to throw Congress off the track, and he figured Congress doesn't know anything about monetary policy, so you just go blah, 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 and they'll just go, yes, sir, when's lunch? And so it turns out that even Greenspan himself, he said, he called it, well, what I was using there was syntax destruction. So he's even got his own weirdo phrase for it. So think about this now. So this is a guy who's in charge of the money supply, and he admits that he just blabs and blabs about nothing to throw Congress off the track. Meanwhile, he's totally clueless about what's going on. And we're supposed to repose our confidence in these people. And that you and I, who are skeptical of this, there's something wrong with us. We must be antisocial or something if you don't like Alan Greenspan. Something wrong here. Now, ultimately, what does it boil down to, though? We can answer all these objections all day long. It basically boils down to there are two ways to acquire wealth. You can create wealth by serving your fellow man. That's the way a civilized person creates wealth. Or you can expropriate people. You can loot people. At the point of a gun, you can take stuff. That's it. Everything boils down, one way or another, boils down to one of those two original ways. Well, it's obvious which way our society has chosen. So we have agriculture subsidies that help the farmer, and that basically amount to a gun in the ribs of everybody else. We have sugar quotas that steal on behalf of the sugar producers. We've got the Export-Import Bank, which diverts credit to certain favored firms. We've got the Federal Reserve, which diverts credit to certain favored firms. And this just goes on and on and on and on, not to mention all the other things, the military-industrial complex. All of this occurs through the barrel of a gun. And we have to ask ourselves, is this the most humane way for human beings to interact with each other? At the point of a gun. It's indirect. Sure, we hire somebody else to wield the guns. Is there really no other way we can live than by my group impoverishes the rest of you and enriches itself, and then your group is going to impoverish us and enrich itself? What if we just stopped doing that? Wouldn't we be a lot richer? So what it really boils down to is the foundation of civilization peace and free exchange and voluntary interaction of individuals? Or is the foundation of civilization, as the state would have it, the gun, the badge, and the hangman? The state has warped our moral sense and taught us that looting and aggression are okay as long as they're done by majority vote. And it has turned us against each other. It has taken natural harmonies and replaced them with disharmony. And it is at this time that we ought to recall with Murray Rothbard that what we are really faced with in society is not a conflict of rich versus poor, or white versus black, or city versus country, or industry versus agriculture, but all of us against the parasites who live off our labor and train us to believe that there is no other way to live. There is another way to live, and it's called liberty, and join us. Thank you. Second speech is much shorter. It's like I can't even dignify it as a speech. It's like 5 minutes of pep talk. But I do want to give a pep talk.